If it wasn't for Lewis's past reputation, is he the sort of guy you'd put in a Ferrari?
You're talking from experience, sir?
No. Fortunately, Alonso was before I started.
The little shenanigans that's going on behind the scene at Red Bull. Now,
If you perform like that in any other industry, you'd be sacked.
go on.
Do we think that he can push Max?
No.
That answer. Hello, welcome to On Track GP. We are brand new. This is the F1 podcast on DR Sports. I'm Abby. Of course, we have Robbie with us as well. And if you haven't seen him before on Track GP, this is Richard Bradley. He is Le Mans winner. I think he's super cool. He is...
Again, tried to be.
You are extremely cool.
He drives some fast cars, man.
He drives fast cars. He loves F1. He could be an F1 driver.
Yeah, maybe.
That's basically how I'm selling you.
Yeah, that's very nice of you.
He's very,
if
very
you,
cool.
if you would disagree.
Do you know what? You're like, I saw a car that you were driving on your Instagram, right? Would that car be as fast as a F1 car? The one of those cars you drive at Le Mans?
Yeah, I mean, top speed wise at Le Mans, yeah, we go well over 200 miles an hour. I mean, in terms of lap time, no, but in terms of top speed, yeah, we get... we'll be faster than the F1 cars go at some circuits.
Faster?
Yeah. I mean, on the slower circuits that F1 goes to, like Monaco, our top speed will be much higher. But then the F1 cars, when they get to like Mexico, where they do nearly 400 kilometers an hour, we're not quite that quick. Honestly, an F1 car compared to any other car on the planet is just another galaxy.
Like a rocket ship.
It's just a rocket. Yeah. It's you can't comprehend how fast they are. I've driven a few F1 cars, older generation ones, and they're rapid, but this generation of cars now is just stunningly quick.
Well, as we said, we are brand new to DR. We have been doing On Track for a while, haven't we? In terms of F1, we absolutely love it. And of course, it's the start of the new season. We're 2 races in, Bahrain and Saudi. They've been on Saturdays for anyone like me who was confused when I got to Sunday and I went, where was the race? And I had to do some backtracking. But we've had 2 races in. What have you made of the start to the season so far? Because again, we're seeing a lot of Red Bull dominance, aren't we, Rich?
We're seeing a lot of Red Bull dominance, but I'd like to say that it's a bit less than it was at this time last year. I think Ferrari definitely looked closer, which is great for the sport. And the same thing again, if you actually ignore the Red Bull dominance, the battle from third place down has been really, really exciting. We've had no shortage of drama. Obviously, we saw how aggressive Sainz was in Bahrain. Of course, we had the Magnussen holding up the train situation in Jeddah. Ollie Behrman coming in for Sainz. I think it's actually been a promising start to the season. I think Red Bull are ahead. I think they're catchable, but it's been really exciting barring the dominance of Max.
Well, we'll have a look at Bahrain first, Rob, because we did say it has been dominant in terms of Red Bull. Obviously, 1-2s both weeks now. But Sergio Perez, who got a lot of criticism last season for maybe not being so competitive, he started well last season, but obviously tailed off. This season, he's doing the same. Do we think that he can push Max?
No.
That answer.
No, he can't because he's just not as good a driver as Max. As simple as that. That's why Max is the #1 driver. Like, he's just miles ahead.
He was I think it was 22 seconds he was behind Checo.
And he qualifies way better than him. Sergio should do better in qualification. I'm surprised actually that they retained him. I thought they might have brought someone else in new.
Yeah.
I think it's that big support he's got over in Mexico that's kept him that drive. I know, this is my opinion, but I'm surprised they kept him.
Yeah, I think when you look at Formula One, people forget Formula One is also a business. We saw how Ferrari's share price just went bonkers when it was announced that Lewis had signed for them. And obviously, Checo in Mexico and Latin America is a complete rock star and brings a lot of value to Red Bull as a company. But I think you're right. He's just not as good as Max. And I think that as long as he accepts that and he does what he's done, because at the end of the day, he came second in both races, and that's all Red Bull can ask for.
Yeah.
No mistakes, no damage, no nothing like that. Finish 1-2.
Just making sure that he's there right behind Max to secure, obviously, another hopeful,
exactly.
another win.
I was interested in what you said there about them teams being a bit nearer. I hope you're right.
Yeah.
Because I've already started slightly getting disillusioned at the way in which on both races
he just drove
off into the sunset, and nobody could get near him like Max Verstappen. And
well,
I'm like,
I think Max
please not make this be like this the whole season. Listen, I've said it before, right? He's the best right now. He's a wonderful driver. He ain't doing nothing wrong. He's just doing what he does best, right? But for the actual season, I want to see someone getting in amongst them. Maybe it is going to be the Ferraris. But you know, somebody's got to get a bit closer to him this season.
I feel like this season, not that we've written it off, but obviously when you and I have maybe been speaking before the season started, we kind of thought that this is going to be a bit of a write-off of a season because there's so much coming next year in 25. There's a lot of moving parts. Well, there's a lot of moving parts in 2025. You know, Audi are coming in. There's going to be a lot of changes. Who knows if Andretti will take over Haas? In terms of drivers, obviously Lewis is going to be at Ferrari. We don't know what will happen with Carlos Sainz. And again, Checo is also out of contract. So we don't know where he will end up. Plus, there's all this investment going into the likes of Alpine. So they're going to want to start to see a return on their investment shortly. So I feel like this year is probably not going to be too dissimilar to last.
I think so. And I think that the turning point where you start to know is all the teams always plan a big upgrade for when the European season starts. The reason for this is because obviously with the travel and the freight and everything like that, if there is a crash in practice or something, then if they're in Europe, it's a lot easier to air freight a spare part overnight and get it on the car. Otherwise, you have to use a completely different spec car halfway through a weekend, which is never ideal. So I think once we come to the first leg of the European part of the season, that's when we're going to start to see whether people are going to be able to catch Red Bull. I think that was when McLaren made their catalyst last year. So honestly, these first 3-4 races up until China probably, it's probably going to be a Max dominance, and then we're going to see how much Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren are going to be able to catch.
Yeah, just starting to like kind of gauge where everyone is.
Or being a bit on an evil level.
We've got a curveball here.
You know, I don't.
What's your curveball? Come on.
You know, the little shenanigans that's going on behind the scene at Red Bull. Now, could those little things that are going on in the background, you know, with Christian Horner and you know Marco and those could those things sort of make them lose focus a bit?
Well,
that's why that seems to be my only hope at the moment, and I don't want I don't.
You do want it. Just admit it.
I
think a lot of people want to see the back of Christian Horner.
It could sort of make them lose focus a little bit.
You would think though. I mean, there was a lot. It all exploded just before Bahrain. So you know, we don't need to go into details as what happened. Everybody who follows F1 and maybe who don't follow F1 will know what happened that opening weekend. So there's still a lot going on. One thing that did catch the eye though was the argument between Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner. You know, they were very heated. The comments that Max has come out and also said is that he will only stay at Red Bull as long as Helmut Marko is there. So signs are pointing towards...
And he could get suspended, Marko.
Yeah, he could. But the signs are pointing towards either a Horner exit or a potential Max Verstappen exit, which Red Bull are not going to want.
No, and it's interesting. The thing is, firstly, on the Marko side, remember Marko's out of contract at the end of this year. And he's also, I can't remember his exact age, but he's in his 80s. You know, he might actually just feel like retiring after this. You never know. But it's a very, very difficult position for Red Bull to be in because, yes, you can argue that Max right now is such an asset that you can't afford to lose him. But then you can also argue that Christian has been there since 2005 and has built this team into a super team, especially since 2009, 2010 onwards. So there's a lot of shenanigans going on. It's been more like EastEnders than Formula One in these past few weeks. It has, hasn't it? And some of the stuff that's come out is
more entertaining than the race.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's going to derail their focus too much, though, because everything's kind of set in stone, at least until the European season. I don't think it's going to have an effect on the guys in the team because they'll just crack on with their jobs, and that's what we've seen. But, however, if there is a big shake-up, if something does happen with Christian leaving, which we don't know if that's going to happen, I think that will have an effect, especially as we get towards the European leg of the season, because that's when things, you know, at the minute things just kind of tick along, but then all of a sudden the processes all have to change.
I have to ask you a question then. Let's say Christian Horner does leave. Who would be the next person you think in line to become team principal of Red Bull?
I mean, they'd have to go for someone within. It's not going to be someone like Adrian Newey. You know, probably the most likely person is their sporting director. I think it's Jonathan Wheatley. I might have got that wrong. But I think it's Jonathan Wheatley, someone like that, someone from management within. It would be quite difficult to find someone qualified to be able to take over that position and learn the system at this point in the season. So it will 100% be someone within.
See, he's the guy, isn't he? The genius, Adrian Newey.
Adrian Newey, yeah.
You know, the aerodynamic genius. He makes that car so special.
And everywhere he goes, he
creates a brilliant car.
Everywhere he goes, and but then I don't know, but I don't know. With any team in it, when things ain't behind the scenes are starting to not
ripples.
quite go, you can lose a bit of focus. So
I mean, we're all football fans, aren't we? We all see what happens when the fans
Absolutely.
get against the
Yeah,
manager. So.
Well, I think from a Max perspective, you know, him and Christian Horner will both be completely focused on making sure that they continue to have a good season. Same with Checo as well. So I don't think that necessarily
But
affects
does he like Christian
drivers. No, I don't think he necessarily. I don't think you necessarily have to like that person to make you do a job. At the end of the day, it's just Max in the car.
I mean, in sports car racing, we share the car with 2 other drivers, and I've certainly had teammates I don't like, but we've won races together.
You get on with it.
Just get on with your job, and I'm sure again the football reference. I'm sure teammates don't like each other at some point. It's just human nature.
Yeah.
And they've proven it so far. You know, they if you didn't know about the Red Bull situation outside, he would have just gone business as usual.
Yeah, if it hadn't been leaked, we'd had no idea.
you ever tried to run a mate off the track?
Once or twice.
Let's change the subject.
Shall we,
Kindly get me in hot water there.
let's have a look at Ferrari, because Bahrain, Carlos Sainz, he looked to be on a mission, and obviously this is his first race back. Again, first time we've seen him really since the Lewis Hamilton announcement came, which I assume would have been a bit of a shock to him, because maybe he's got plans. Maybe he thinks he's already going to Audi. Maybe there's something that we don't know.
I think what people have to remember is there's 13 drivers out of contract at the end of this year. So there is a lot of movement, and the managers in the background right now will be like a swarm of bees going to every team, talking to every person. And, you know, he will be talking to every single team with a vacancy at the minute. And I'm sure he would have been at any time just to get feelers, because in Formula One, you've never got job security unless you're in a position like Max or like Lewis, where you're or Alonso, someone like that. So I'm sure he would have been prepared for this. But, you know, in Bahrain, he did look like a completely different driver. And it was a shame what happened to him in Jeddah. You know, we don't want to see that to happen to anybody. But
no, it's a real shame. But it was a great opportunity for Oliver Bearman.
I tell you now, I first saw Ollie Bearman in July or August of 2021. I was at Imola working in a Formula 3 race. He was in Formula 4. And Formula 4 is a category where the cars are very, very identical. And he was able to drive away multiple times and just made it look easy. He was a complete standout. I've actually got receipts. I sent it to my friend's WhatsApp group saying, if you want to bet on a world champion in the next 5 to 10 years, put your money on Ollie Bearman. Wow. And then you could always see he was going to be a star in the making. And what a job he did this weekend.
Unbelievable job. Honestly, incredible when you think that's his first race.
Drive,
yeah, his first race in F1. P7.
I can't stress how difficult.
Has anyone had a good debut like that before, like that you can think of off the top of your head, off the bat?
They have, but they've had, the difference is they either did it in the era where there was no testing ban, so they had 6,000 kilometers in the car before they drove it, or they had a proper pre-season to get used to it. No one has had to come in the middle of a weekend on a circuit like Jeddah, a car they've never driven, with systems they've never used before, in a team they haven't directly worked with before, because obviously there's always changes over the winter, and had to adapt like that. And remember, he was 2 practice sessions down. He was 3 hours of track time down on everyone. I cannot tell you how hard it is to jump into what he did, and he didn't put a foot wrong all weekend.
No, he didn't, and he also managed to finish ahead of Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton.
I mean, wow.
The only thing I would say with him being at Ferrari is that obviously, you know, the seats are taken. You know, at the minute it's obviously Sainz and Leclerc, then it's going to be Leclerc and Hamilton. So what does he do next? Does he have to go?
I mean, the other interesting thing is, okay, you can argue with Lewis that Lewis is a bit like the David Beckham effect, where he brings so much to the value of the company, he kind of justifies his salary. But if you're looking at drivers who are asking for $10 million, $15 million a year, and you got Ollie Bearman who will want, I don't know, $250,000, why wouldn't you take the younger generation? And every one of the younger generation who has come in recently has done the job. Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri. You've got, you know, Ollie Bearman now. Okay, the only question mark is Logan Sargent, Liam Lawson last year. The question is, why do you take...
George Russell sort of got he got a look in. I know he was at Williams before, but he sort of got a look in unexpectedly as well, didn't he?
Exactly.
And seized his opportunity. So
I'm saying you should put some faith in the young guns. Do we need to always rely on these sorts of people? If Ocon and Gasly, for example, are having a bad season and they haven't ever done anything stand out in their careers, give the young guns a chance. We've got Dragovic on the sidelines.
I think we've spoken about Alpine before. I think we think that there's going to be a big shake-up at Alpine probably come the summer, especially if they continue to not perform in the way that is expected now with all this investment. investment. Just quickly on Ollie Bearman, here's some cool little stats for you. Youngest driver to score points on his F1 debut.
That's quite
Ever.
impressive.
Youngest driver to race for Ferrari, which is very cool.
That's
I mean,
very
he's
cool.
18 years old. Imagine like going back into like sixth form and saying that.
That's really cool.
Very cool.
Like you can insure it.
Yeah. Can he get insurance? Yeah. First British driver for Ferrari since Eddie Irvine in 1999, which is great because we love seeing British drivers. First driver to make his F1 debut for Ferrari since Arturo Mazzario in 1972. And he is the first driver to be on the grid at the same time as someone who won a world championship from the year before he was born.
God,
That
that's
is
a
Fernando
fact,
Alonso,
isn't it?
2005. Makes you feel old, that.
It does, doesn't
Makes
it?
you feel really, really old. No, he's absolutely brilliant. And I think the question is, if Carlos Sainz is better, obviously he's had appendicitis, if he's able to race, does he race or do we let Ollie Bearman go again?
I mean, appendicitis isn't a big operation. We saw, Alex Albon came back from it, no problem, to Singapore, which is physically the hardest race of the year. And, we see it all the time again in football where people have quick operations in the week and they're back playing the next weekend. So it would be very naive of Ferrari to think that Bearman can automatically replace Sainz. Plus, also F2 is racing in Melbourne, and Bearman now actually has more points in Formula One than he does in F2, so in his main campaign. So he needs to focus on that a little bit as well.
Yeah, and take him back to earth. Looking at Ferrari though, have you kind of thought that they've looked good in the opening two races? I mean, obviously podium on each, but do we think they're even close to maybe challenging?
I don't know about if they'll be able to challenge, but it's a bit like last year. Remember, they started off really well last year. They've obviously got a good car. To me, I think the potential is there. That's why Lewis Hamilton's going there. He wouldn't be leaving, Mercedes to go to Ferrari if he ain't seen something and heard something. So I think they'll. I get the feeling they're going to be the closest. I don't think they're good enough to test that Red Bull yet. I still feel the Red Bull's got a lot more in it if they even want. I don't even think they're showing us their full hand yet, but they're definitely the closest team, I feel, to that Red Bull car.
I think you're spot on. I think we're starting to slowly see the Vasseur effect, though. I mean, Frederick Vasseur, the new team boss who's come in, he's got a track record in every category he's ever been in, and I think we're slowly starting to see that. And I'm still convinced that's one of the reasons Lewis went to Ferrari. I think Robbie's right. Red Bull, especially as they brought a new concept this year, I think they've got a lot in hand, especially in the development phase. So I'm not confident Ferrari will catch them, but I think that we're going to see more than one win for a non-Red Bull car this year, unlike last year.
Okay, nice little segue there into Mercedes for this weekend. They're not having the strongest start, are they? Again, Russell 5th, Hamilton 7th. Both of the cars had issues with overheating. Hamilton also complaining of a broken seat and battery charge issues. It feels like it's going from bad to worse from a Mercedes point of view. Every season, they're just getting worse and worse in the decline. And I totally agree with what you said in terms of Lewis, that if you think about how dominant Mercedes were, and obviously they opted to go their own way with the car. We've spoken about side pods and the porpoising so many times, but it's a very big thing to go from Mercedes being champion there 7 times to then saying, actually, I don't believe in the project here anymore. And also, I feel like it's not having the belief in Toto.
Yeah, it's getting a bit. The atmosphere doesn't seem that nice in there at the minute. And the worst thing for me and the biggest concern was watching that onboard of Lewis following Lando Norris in Jeddah in the high-speed sections. There's just such a lack of downforce in that car, and with any racing car, downforce it creates everything because it decides how well you can brake. It's obviously the high-speed corners, how efficient the downforce works at the lower speed, and even in the wet, downforce actually has more of an effect on handling than it does in the dry, believe it or not. Once you get into a high downforce car,
That's why every team needs an Adrian Newey.
Exactly.
But the thing is, you can't have Adrian Newey. There's only one of him.
Exactly. But it's very.
It's a big fall from grace from them. I mean, this weekend, the one we were just talking about was in Bahrain, but in Saudi, Russell was 6th and Hamilton was 9th. I mean,
that's 4. And the worst thing is, if you haven't got downforce, that generally means that you should be having less drag, which means you should be rapid in a straight line. They look very ordinary in the straights as well. I mean, we saw with the Sonoda battles over the weekend with Bearman, we saw that the Visa RB doesn't have the cornering potential that the Ferrari does, but it's rapid on the straights. So Mercedes don't have that. I think it's going to be a very long season for them, to be honest. I think Lewis has made a smart move.
He knew what he's doing.
Yeah.
He knew what he was doing. He's seen it. I mean, listen, when he made his first move, he could see the potential in Mercedes. That's why he left.
Yeah.
Now he's doing it again. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame to see, man, because, you know, they've been such a dominant team.
Yeah.
And that analogy you gave earlier on about football teams, a bit like Man United, isn't it? Like,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You know, dominant, and then all of a sudden, like, the decline is looking really bad at the moment.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's the same team, can you?
Yeah.
Like, all conquering, like, qualifying, they always a Mercedes on
You would never
pole.
think you'd see a Mercedes ninth
Yeah,
and Lewis
exactly.
Hamilton
Yeah,
ninth
it's
in a
just
race.
like, yeah, but even in qualifying, it's
Yeah.
not great, is it? You know, it's just
They're not dominant at
it's
all.
really,
No.
really, really strange to see the decline.
And it's been, you know, you're almost getting to the point where if it wasn't for Lewis's past reputation, is he the sort of guy you'd put in a Ferrari? If you just look at it from the last 2 years, you wouldn't
Yeah.
put him as an
He
elite
didn't
level
win a race
driver.
last year, did he? So-
Exactly, and you know you have to question what's going on there. As you say, do they have to start looking internally? Do things need to change? Because a company like Mercedes, they're not going to wait that long.
No, they might have to have another shake-up. Let's have a look at McLaren. Another nice start to the season. Got some good points on the board for Norris and Piastri. First race, Norris was 6th, Piastri was 8th. This weekend, Piastri finished 4th. Really strong weekend for him. I feel like this is their opportunity this year to cement maybe the 3rd place.
Yeah, well, the first thing is it's a hell of a lot better than it was last year.
At the start, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think the other thing which has been really interesting is I think that Piastri has made a little bit of a jump over the winter. I've seen that, especially in Jeddah. I think he had a very, very tough race in Jeddah, you know, when he was in his battles. But I think that he looked very, very mature. There was no comments on the radio lashing out or anything like that. Not that there was last year, but there was an element which says to me, okay, he's not a rookie anymore. He looks very, very secure. And I'm really excited by McLaren. They clearly have a good development phase. We saw that last year.
He's definitely pushing Norris as well.
100%. And that's just healthy for both of them. That's going to be good for both of them because it's not like Norris is doing a bad job. I think both of them are just doing a really good job at the minute.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited by McLaren. I think they could cement themselves in that 3rd place.
I think they've got no better opportunity than this year, especially with Mercedes again having a poor start. Not saying they couldn't be resurgent, but I think if we assume how the constructors will look, it would probably be Red Bull, Ferrari, and then that 3rd place is absolutely up for grabs. I'm not seeing too much from the Astons again at the minute. So
well, you see Alonso, but then Stroll just is Stroll, isn't it?
Stroll's just strolling.
Yeah,
just strolling. What do you think is going to happen with Astons realistically?
I mean, there's only so long you can keep someone like Fernando Alonso when 13 drivers are out of contract at the end of the year, right? I mean, he's like a second up the road on his teammates, so that's going to put him in the market window for any organisation.
And he can still do a job.
Mercedes have got a vacancy.
Oh, you're a Mercedes fan, Rob. Would you like to see Alonso at Mercedes? No.
I'm like you now with the younger drivers. I want to see one of them younger. How many more years? Like,
oh, but he can still. He's like
he's still a great driver, but I'm a bit like what you were saying there. Let's see some of the young guns come through now. Some of the younger, sort of guys like Behrman and that getting a drive. But listen, Alonso, as we know, he's brilliant. You know, Stroll on the other hand
crashed out at the weekend.
Daddy's.
Yeah,
that's the only reason he's got that drive. Let's be real.
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah,
if you perform like that in any other industry, you'd be sacked.
It's gone. I mean, but because his dad bankrolls the whole thing.
Yeah, that's
he's safe.
You know?
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
and you've got Felipe Drugovich, who had a standout season when he won the Formula 2 championship, just sat on the sidelines twiddling his thumbs.
Yeah.
And again, when people who he beat Sargent, you know, he beat Lawson, and he's just there, you know, twiddling his thumbs, watching someone like Behrman
Of course it's
get the opportunity.
Well, it's super frustrating because there's only 2 seats per team. So.
Yeah, and it must be frustrating that, you know, you could be there, you've got the ability to drive that car and do. And you know you do a lot better, but the owner's kids in the car.
Well, I think there'll come a point, you know, just from watching a bit of Drive to Survive so far, that, you know, Lawrence Stroll opening episode, very keen about, you know, wanting Aston to be challenging for titles. At some point, he's going to have to make a decision whether his son is worth keeping in the seat, but then you're also going to suffer on getting a world championship. I know they've got a lot of work to do on the car.
I think he would go for his son.
But I don't know. I mean, it depends. If he's put a lot of money into that, he's a billionaire. You know, you're investing a lot of money into it. Sometimes you've got to just make a business decision.
Family first.
Say, you know, I'm your dad, and you've got to get out of the car.
But the other thing is, again, it's back to what I said earlier about Lewis and the Ferrari effect. Do you remember when Aston Martin were really good in the first couple of races last year, how much their stock price went up? And Aston Martin financially had a terrible few years. And Lawrence is going to have board members to answer to. He's going to have to justify why that is. Because if you put someone on the same level as Alonso and you've got 2 cars consistently in the top 6, you're going to win not win, but you're going to be at the front on Sunday, sell on Monday.
Yeah.
And you've got to justify that from a business point of view. And I'm not sure how long he's going to be able to do that.
Also, from a Stroll perspective, you've got Alonso next to you, right? So you should be learning off of one of the greatest ever drivers. And I haven't really seen much improvement. Bar the odd race here and there.
Exactly. And Alonso has seemed quite open to helping Lance in the past. I mean, Alonso seems open to helping anybody he doesn't see as a threat.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he sees him as a threat, he seems like crushing them like an ant. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he can say
You're
that.
talking from experience there?
No. Fortunately, Alonso was before I started, so I was lucky.
Let's have a look at that RBV car, whatever we're calling it now. We'll just stick with RB. Yeah. Yuki Tsunoda and Danny Ricciardo, which we thought would be like a match made in heaven in terms of like the banter and, you know, everything we'd want to see, a bit of personality in F1. But I don't really think they like each other very much.
No, there was a little bit of a hissy fit going on in Bahrain, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You know, I thought, that wasn't impressive by Yuki, though. That was like something a child would do. If some of the kids I look after and coach and manage in karting, if they ever did that, even in the mini kart category, I would be furious with them.
Just to give some context, Tsunoda was not happy. He didn't want to let Danny Ricciardo go in front so he could challenge Kevin Magnussen. And at the end of the race, Yuki was weaving the car right next to Danny Ricciardo. And Danny Ricciardo didn't like it and called him an effing helmet. Which is very Danny Rick.
I think that was pretty generous, to be honest. I mean, that could have he was so close to him. There could have been so much damage done in that. And especially when you got the cost caps and everything.
Yeah.
That's just
silly.
Yeah, very silly. But I thought that, you know, Yuki bounced back very well in Jeddah. I think he did a good job in Jeddah, and Ricciardo did not have fun in Jeddah.
No. Well, this is what you were saying, right, about having some new guard come in.
New guys, man.
RB decided to go with Danny Ricciardo. Maybe that is for commercial value. You know, again, he's a big character.
He's a personality, isn't he? He's like, you know, I mean, I like seeing him. He's funny, but
Liam Lawson is a great driver.
New guys. Can we see some of the new guys?
And just remember, Lawson was the first person to overtake Verstappen last year.
Yep.
You know, at Zandvoort in his debut race. And
he did a great job.
Yeah, and he was quicker than Tsunoda last year when he was in the car, and he was rightfully quite peeved about not getting the seat. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think Ricciardo, you know, I like Ricciardo. I'm a big fan of his and everything, but I think that he's under serious pressure. Lawson is very deserving of that seat.
I was really surprised this year when all teams just retained.
Yeah, it was
the same driver.
I think that's because everyone is out of 13 out of contracts at the end of this year. You know, F1 contracts are so expensive. So what's the point of buying them out when you can have them for free?
Yeah, and also the other thing is that, you know, because everybody knows how these cars work, the big regulation changes coming next year. So everybody's going to have to relearn the cars next year, whereas these ones are very similar. So if you're going to put someone new, it's probably better off waiting for 25. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of younger drivers and a lot of drivers we don't expect have options for 25
I hope so.
already.
I want to see a fresh grid. I do. And like, you know, even looking at stake, right? So we know that stake is, you know, kick in countries which don't have betting. So that's who you might have seen at the weekend. But they suffered issues as well. You know, we've still got Valtteri Bottas racing, who is an incredible driver. But there comes a point where you think, okay, let's get out the old guard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've got a slightly softer spot for Valtteri, to be honest. I think that he's just been... I mean, in the past couple of years, Alfa Romeo have just been quite a boring team.
Yeah, we hardly ever talk about Alfa Romeo.
No, but they just kind of go around and do their own thing.
But don't you think that we need to see a team actually be relevant on the grid? I don't think that F1 can afford to have just passengers.
No, but
not a pun.
But I do think though that the Bottas would bring extreme value with his experience to someone like Audi when they do come in. I think he'd be very attractive.
Could you see a Bottas and Sainz partnership? Because I'm convinced that Carlos Sainz is going to.
I can't see it, to be honest, and that's purely because I spend, I spend a lot of time in China, and I've seen the effect and the presence of Audi in China. And to have a Chinese driver in Audi in their biggest market, I could see there's a lot of benefits to that for Audi. So honestly, I'd be there's a possibility, and I could see it, but Audi commercially might decide to go for Zhou. But I can also then see Zhou going to Alpine. Remember, he used to be on their young driver program. There's a lot of moving parts here.
Well, actually, you took us onto Alpine really nicely there, because looking at them in Bahrain, they had a terrible opener. Both cars qualifying on the last row of the grid. Gasly retired, Ocon out on the points. Like we've said quite a few times, there's a lot of investment that's gone in. You know, the likes of Travis Kelce, Trent Alexander-Arnold. There's a lot of people, a lot of sportsmen, Anthony Joshua, that have invested in Alpine, and this will be the second season of the investment, kind of, or halfway through, you know, almost a year or so. But we're not seeing anything. And I think the all-French driver lineup was a lovely idea, but clearly they don't get on. And I just don't see any cohesion between them, the team, the car. Alpine are just mid-table, doing absolutely nothing.
It's Chelsea.
Yeah.
I'm getting all the analogies in, you know what I mean? They're same colour as well.
The Chelsea of F1.
Yeah, they're very poor at the moment. Underachieving, aren't they? Underachieving,
Massively.
And that's never good in F1. We know that there's going to be certain cars, going to be certain levels, but when you start underachieving, that's not great.
I think the other thing is in motorsport, the French are quite cliquey as well. You can always historically see that the French teams like to have French drivers and French personnel. But I do think the Ocon Gasly romance is starting to fade a little bit. And I think you'll see some young blood. Also, Alpine have a very exciting French driver in Formula 2, Victor Martins, ex-Formula 3 champion, did a very good job last year in F2. I think if he has a good year this year, he could have a shoe-in for 2025 as well.
There's going to be a lot of changes next year.
I think so.
This is what I mean. This year's a bit of a write-off, so just enjoy this year for what it is. Next year's the one where we start cooking.
Yeah.
That's a good year.
It'll be Max again.
It'll be Max again. Another dominant year for
But
Max.
in what car? Who
It's really interesting on the Alpine, because they were very settled when they had Otmar, and he looked to be a really good principal. And of course they had Piastri, and then Piastri subsequently went to McLaren. So they did have tools there for their future, but just making the wrong decisions.
Yeah, and if you see Otmar now, if you look at Instagram and stuff like that, he's loving life. You know, he was at St. Pete for the IndyCar race at the weekend in Tampa,
Otmar's just
Florida.
having the best time.
So he's a big character now, isn't he? Big name.
Exactly.
Yeah, might as well. Why not just cash in on the
good
back of Drive to Survive? Gunther's written a book. Let's talk about Williams. What have you thought of them so far? Because obviously Alex Albon having a great season last year. Can he do anything in this Williams car?
Well, he got punted into the wall in Jeddah, which was unfortunate. That he was completely innocent there, and obviously got a load of damage. And Sargent is just clearly proving, that the doubters were probably correct. There's just been no sign of improvement. It's deja vu again.
We know he's really there for the American pool.
Yeah,
that's what he's there for.
Yeah,
4 American races.
Yeah,
they want the money. American star boy.
I mean, again, it's probably one of the, back to what we were saying about the new cars for 25. It's probably one of the reasons they didn't put somebody new in, because they they got these regulations changes. But he has to up his game or he's out.
Yeah,
Alex again is looking like a superstar.
I always see it's a bit sad when I see Williams. I've got a soft spot.
Yeah, I think everyone has a soft spot for Williams.
Right, and I got invited into their garage at the race at Monza. So I've got a very big soft spot for them because they looked after me. But, they again underachieving, I feel. Their car's been underachieving for quite a few years now. Remember, Williams used to be one of the biggest names in the sport. So iconic team.
And beautiful cars as well.
Yeah. And just, I would love to see them just get back up there. You know?
I think with the regulation changes, maybe it's something that can be achieved.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so.
Because, over time.
They're still a legendary name in F1. But they need to improve. They need to, because as I said, there's one thing that you look at a team and you say, all right, we know you're going to be down the grid, but are you living up to where you should be? They're not. They're another one of them teams that are not. They're underachieving at the moment.
I mean, the other thing as well is we talk about these driver contracts coming up at the end of the year. Any of the elite level drivers are going to look at Williams as an attractive option for next year, because Sargent, unless he improves, he will have to go. But then looking at that, have they done enough to convince Alex to stay? I doubt it. I think he's going to be very hot property.
Yeah.
He will be, yeah.
You'd immediately look at him for that
I think Alex
Mercedes seat.
Albon, yeah.
Remember, they lost Russell before, so
I think Alex Albon in a Mercedes would be a good move.
And him, Alex and George are very good friends as well. Have known each other for years.
But again, it's really going to be dependent on what they do with the car.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for someone like Alex, it will be a lot more attractive to go to Mercedes than
stay at Williams.
Than stay at Williams.
Yeah, I do agree. And Haas, of course, there's no Gunter in the paddock. How are we thinking in terms of Magnussen and Hulkenberg? Are we just looking at them at the back of the grid and we think they're just going to stay there?
No, I mean, they've definitely made an improvement on last year. You know, I know quite
have they?
Have they?
well,
Marginal.
They're not falling off by 10 seconds a lap at the end of the race with the degradation.
Well, we knew they had great one lap pace,
Yeah.
especially for Hulkenberg.
Yeah, I mean, I know quite a few people in Haas and working with them at the minute on a few things, and they're definitely, they say that qualifying wise they're very similar to where they were last year, but they've seemed to have fixed somewhat the degradation issues. They've had especially in Jeddah, they had a bit of a rough one. Hulkenberg was on for a good quali before the engine issue.
Yeah. Kevin Magnussen, 10-second penalties.
Yeah, I mean, Magnussen had. I mean, I saw Visa, the RBs were complaining about Magnussen's unsporting-like behaviour. They would have done exactly what Magnussen would have done. I mean, he just played the team game. He got the 2 penalties for driving recklessly and deservedly so, and then he tried to help Hulk get the points, and those points could change Haas's life. So if a few people complain about it, well,
every point counts, especially when it comes to Haas, like at the back of the grid. They need it because they're in that back of the grid battle. And I don't think they can afford to finish rock bottom again. Andretti is sniffing around.
And the other thing that's interesting with Haas, though, if we're thinking about next year, who's got 6 free practice sessions with them this year? Oliver Behrman. So all of a sudden, he's put himself right in the shop window, and they already said that he's very impressive. So, I think Magnussen especially is under quite a lot of pressure. Hulkenberg is doing.
He was decent. He was decent last season, and so far this season
he's been clearly ahead of Kevin. I think Kevin needs to step it up a bit because Behrman's put himself in the shop window very firmly now.
Yeah. All right. Before we wrap up, looking ahead to Melbourne, how do we see this one finishing? Who's on the podium for you, Rob?
Okay, who's third?
Who's taking the third place?
It'd be Verstappen, obviously, and Checo, and there'll be a Ferrari. Leclerc.
Australia is always an interesting one. It's one
Early
of those
race, 4
yeah.
a.m.
It's always an interesting one.
Max might wake up tired.
4 a.m. for us.
It's always a bit of carnage there, and I don't know why. It's just one of those circuits that brings a little bit of carnage.
We had loads of red flags last year.
We did, yeah, and it's always you'd be an idiot to bet against Red Bull at the minute, and they're not going to bring any upgrades. For most teams won't bring any big upgrades for that circuit. But I've got a sneaky suspicion you could see a Mercedes on the podium.
It would have to be quite some turnaround.
I think that, but I think that because
Which one?
I was thinking Russell, and the reason I'm thinking that is because there's not many high-speed corners in Australia, and the degradation isn't that high. Now, if you've got low downforce, your car's going to be sliding around more. Bahrain is massive deg, which is going to hurt the Mercs, and Jeddah is all high speed, and we saw how much Lewis is suffering with downforce when he's behind Lando. So I think Australia will suit their car a bit more, and I think Merc could get a sneaky podium.
Okay, I'm gonna go for Max, Checo, and I'm gonna go Piastri.
Oh, home race.
Home race, and I just think he's brilliant, and I really back the the McLarens this year to do something to go kind of that one step further from last. I'm going to mix it up with that. Thank you very much, Rob. Thank you very much, Rich.
Pleasure.
Of course, this is the new home of On Track GP right here on DR Sports. So make sure you like, subscribe, lock in, and we will see you next time.